welcome to our studio again. And
Thank you for inviting me.
Very glad to see you here. And there are some important events taking place in Washington, and I would like you to comment on this. Very important ambassadorial, hearings happened in the Senate, and
right.
Some of them were already appointed, and these are very crucial countries for Armenia, crucial, ambassadors, diplomats for Armenia. Richard Mills, he's not still ambassador, but he's a nominee, and he has his hearing day in the Senate. And the other one is John Bass, Turkish ambassador. Already he's U.S. ambassador to Turkey, and he was confirmed, actually. And the other one is Tsekuta, right? If I'm not mistaken. And he is Robert Tsekuta. He U.S. ambassador designate to Azerbaijan. And would you please comment? Let's start from actually Richard Mills. What's your opinion on him? This is very important year for Armenia, very important appointment. Also, we know that very soon on April 24th, all Armenians around the world will mark this genocide. Events will take place around the world, and this is very important for us. Who's going to be U.S. ambassador to Turkey? Who's going to be U.S. ambassador to Armenia and to Azerbaijan? So let's start with Richard Mills. What's your opinion on?
Sure. Well, we haven't had an opportunity to meet with Richard Mills. When somebody is nominated, the only people from that point forward on that they meet with are U.S. senators until such time as they're confirmed. Mills had his hearing this week in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and once again, the Obama administration missed the opportunity to properly characterize what occurred, as everybody knows, as a genocide. President Obama committed when he was running for president that he would do so. He has once again broken his word, and we're very sorry that that's the case. Nominee Mills continued that policy. We understand he is not saying the policy, but nonetheless, it's unfortunate that he wasn't able to speak in a forthright fashion. He did indicate that the United States would stand in solidarity with the Armenian people.
That was pretty
on the occasion of the 100th anniversary. And,
strong statement, right?
It was a okay statement.
Yes.
He characterized it as one of the 20th century's worst atrocities, and we appreciate that. He obviously should have characterized it as a genocide. He has experience going back to when Armenia first became independent. He was a desk officer in the State Department. He was the first desk officer for Armenia, so he has a familiarity, which is good. He has pledged to continue to work, as Ambassador Heffron has, on U.S.-Armenia economic relationships, which we applaud.
Yeah.
We believe that those economic relationships should be strengthened, and we hope he's able to follow through on that. It's far beyond time for the United States and Armenia to enter into, at a minimum, a trade and investment framework agreement, and ideally a free trade agreement. So we welcome nominee Mills. We hope that he's able to serve forcefully in Yerevan, represent the United States, and we look forward on April 24th to his commenting on or reflecting upon the first genocide of the 20th century.
And now the question about U.S.-Armenian relations. What is there any change there? Do you see anything could be described as qualitative, quantitative change, like U.S. finally would say that Armenia is our ally? Have you heard of these words? These kind of descriptions about Armenia, and it seems to me it's getting better now.
In the context of Armenia's providing troops in Afghanistan and working with NATO in a number of other areas, I've heard praise from the United States, from both the State Department and from the Department of Defense, the Pentagon, with respect to Armenia's relationship with the United States. That's obviously positive. Ironically, as some in the United States fear that Armenia is becoming closer to Russia, there's been a greater effort on the part of the United States to engage Armenia. And I believe Armenia has to look out for its own interests. It should have a balanced foreign policy relating to those around the world who will be supportive of Armenia. And the United States should be one of those parties. And we welcome a warm foreign relations and economic relationship between the two countries. And I frankly would like to see that develop faster than it has. And I think there's some indication that the United States is finally coming around to that perspective.
Now, since this program will be broadcast on the day of Armenia's independence, looking back, how would you see the dynamic of these relations, really? Do you see, were you also, ANCA was always, on the forefront of, helping these relationships really to grow. And how would you describe the road, of independence of Armenia in terms of U.S.-Armenian relationship, as also as just the country that became independent? What's your philosophy on this?
You cannot look at that relationship without taking into context the large Armenian diaspora in the United States. Solely as a standalone country, Armenia has been welcomed by the United States as a democracy, as a country that embraces free economics. But in a world scheme, it has not been as important as many other countries. We have to be honest about that. But we as Armenian diasporans living in the United States, as citizens of the United States, have been able to advocate for issues of concern to our community, and obviously one of those issues is the economic well-being and the viability of the country of Armenia, particularly surrounded by hostile neighbors in Turkey and Azerbaijan. And I believe our advocacy efforts are paying off, and I believe that also, as I mentioned, as the United States perceives that Russia is attempting to be more influential. And finally, the neighborhood we're in not only is rough, but we border upon the Middle East, and as the Middle East becomes more complex and more challenging for the United States, I believe it will continue to look for additional friends. And as the first Christian country, as a country that has many citizens in the United States, as a country that embraces Western values.
That is actually very important branding that you just described for Armenia. Have you been able to, convey this brand to the U.S. authorities? I think it was a very important point.
We do so forcefully, but never, frankly, as well as I think that we should be doing. And so we continue to knock on their door and continue to make that case. This administration has sadly not been as forthcoming as they said they would be, and I think it's only under the strong efforts of Ambassador Heffron has the administration come around and seen the strategic value of a warm relationship with Armenia. And so the Armenian government and the U.S. government have cooperated on the sale of a large hydroelectric plant, which is pending but agreed to in principle, and a contract's been signed. And I think it's terrific to have a United States company make a major investment.
But it seems to me there is some trouble around that. The contract still...
It seems that the concern is over the process, which it was the decision to sell was not put before the Parliament. I would point out that many national utilities have been sold to Russian interests, and those haven't gone before the Parliament either. So while I'm all in favor of a strong Parliament and understand the parliamentarians' concerns that they should have a voice, as a relationship, as an economic relationship, it's very important for Armenia to have a balanced relationship between Russia and the
Absolutely.
United States and the Western world, Europe as well. So I think this is a very good first step, and hopefully there will be others where
We'll see more of
European
that.
and United States companies continue to invest in Armenia. Armenia is a small country. It needs external investment, and it should be welcoming to those who would like to invest.
I remember interviewing one of presidential candidates, Hachikian. You know, he's
Sure.
legendary dissident, and he said, I said, what is your main question on your agenda? He said, sovereignty. I said, come on, it's not, nobody's talking about that. He said, no, we still don't have that sovereignty. We still need full independence. And he was advocating that very strongly. Of course, he was not the strongest candidate, but I remember that, you know, sentence always, and I still think that the sovereignty is not here yet. What's your opinion? What we should be doing, you know, to strengthen?
I would say that the word I would use is, and I'm not sure that it's different, I would just have a slightly different description, which
Yes.
is viability. And for Armenia to be viable over the next century, it has to have a freer, more vibrant economy, free of corruption, and not just simply talk about free of corruption. Every administration since Armenia became independent has talked about doing away with corruption, has done a lot of arm waving, and has done very little in substance. And until that's addressed, the economy is hampered. The average person suffers tremendously with the artificially inflated prices because of a lack of competition. And that's one major factor that I believe holds Armenia back. The GDP of Turkey has tripled in the last 12 years. It's no coincidence that its influence in the world has gone up as a result of that. Why it's so difficult for the authorities in Armenia to understand that is beyond me. Your place in the world is a function of the kind of economic and military power that you have. Armenia is never going to be a world leader militarily, but with 99% literacy, with a workforce that's highly motivated, Armenia can be a very significant player economically. You don't have to look any further than Israel or Taiwan or Ireland for small countries which do very, very well. And Armenians are every bit as intelligent and every bit as hardworking as Israelis, as Taiwanese, and as the Irish. And there's no reason why Armenia cannot survive and prosper economically. Secondly, on the viability front, Armenia cannot be subservient, and this addresses the issue of sovereignty, to any country, whether it be Europe or Turkey or Azerbaijan or Russia, and cannot be held hostage to any of those countries. So right now, Turkey and Azerbaijan are maintaining a blockade that is illegal under international law, and it's incumbent upon the United Nations and the World Trade Organizations to call them upon that. And in particular, in our advocacy efforts, we call upon the United States to have Turkey drop this blockade without preconditions. This should not be a trade for something that Armenia gives. And in particular, the protocols, which were an abject failure and have never been ratified by Turkey, should be dropped by Armenia. They were an uneven arrangement. Armenia was simply making concessions in return for something that Turkey should have done a long time ago, which is to drop the economic blockade. And one should never give in to a bully, and I believe Turkey's been a bully.
External threats, how would you evaluate that? For example, the last, I think it just in August, early August, we've seen major violation of ceasefire.
Sure.
And we see also one of our allies is helping Azerbaijan, our adversary, in a big way. You know. Is there any way that ANCA can do something to help?
Absolutely,
You know, like
absolutely. And
getting this maybe.
And thank you for raising that issue, because the independence based upon self-determination of Nagorno-Karabakh is very, very high on our agenda, and I think on Armenians throughout the world. And I know this is an issue that we see eye to eye with the administration here in Armenia. The failure on the part of Western authorities to call Azerbaijan on its aggression is simply inexcusable. It's very disappointing. They are starting to edge towards calling out that, but this even-handedness of, well, neither party should engage in aggression is nonsense. Azerbaijan is regularly, hundreds of times a week, violating the ceasefire, and they need to be called upon for that. In the last 60 years, there are literally 100 new countries that have joined the United Nations. The United Nations has gone from roughly 100 to almost 200 members in the last 60 years. Where do those other 100 countries come from? They all came from people who want to govern themselves, from self-determination. So the Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh are simply expressing their will in the way that the people of another 100 countries have done so in the last 60 years and will continue to do so. We will continue to see movements around the world, whether it's Nagorno-Karabakh, whether it's Scotland or Basque. I don't know what those people will each decide to do, but they have the right to make those decisions, and the Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh absolutely have the right, and there is no other defensible position to be taken in that regard.
And now we know also that Turks are helping Azeris now, even they're providing, weapons now.
Sure.
And
It's laughable that Turkey would be viewed somehow, or could be viewed, certainly we don't view them, as an independent arbiter in this process. There's a Minsk group consisting of Russia, France, and the United States, obviously, powerful countries, speaking on behalf of many out there who have interest in this, and they're attempting to mediate this dispute. The Armenians have agreed have made a number of compromises, and the Azeris refuse to compromise. The Armenians will never give back that territory, will never recede from those borders, and it's simply a pipe dream on the part of the Azeris or the Turks that land will ever revert back. That Stalin arbitrarily divided that land, as he did throughout the Soviet Union, and there's no historical basis. On the contrary, the historical basis that goes back thousands of years, Armenians have occupied that land. Even at the time of the independence of Nagorno-Karabakh, the population was in excess of 95% ethnically Armenian. The thought that somehow the Azeris had any right whatsoever to govern this is absolutely ridiculous, and there's no basis in history, in the facts on the ground, or any legal justification.
And now, what will happen in this conference, the Armenia diaspora? You know anything? Are these conferences useful?
I think it is useful to bring diasporans from around the world to Armenia. I think that Armenia has a very valuable, exceedingly valuable resource in its diaspora in 50 countries around the world. After all, 70% of Armenians in the world live outside of Armenia. It would be unwise of any government, and this government understands this, to not pay attention.
But are we using efficiently these tools?
I don't know. I don't think that the government here has enough respect for and interacts sufficiently with the diaspora. You have, again, an incredibly valuable resource. There's not enough listening, there's not enough interaction, there's not enough engagement.
But Ken, who should take care of this? At least there should be someone some organization that can consolidate the resource, as you said. But if not the Armenian government, then who's going to do it?
Well, the Armenian
Your
government,
organization,
the Armenian government has the responsibility for taking the leadership in terms of engagement with the diaspora. And for that, I welcome this conference, as there have been 4 prior conferences. But there needs to be more engagement on not just a macro level, but on a micro level, on the wide range of issues of concern to the diaspora that are of concern to the homeland. On the other side, it is a tall order to unify the diaspora across many different countries, across many different perspectives. Certainly, in terms of being a pan-Armenian organization, the Armenian National Committee is represented in 30 countries around the world, and we are a forceful advocate in each of those countries, whether it be the United States, where obviously I'm from and represent, Europe, Lebanon, Russia, Argentina, Australia, Canada, France. We're active everywhere, Great Britain. The Armenian National Committee has representatives here at this conference.
Have pretty strong grassroots organizations in the States, at least.
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely. We have approximately 40 to 50 local Armenian National Committees, not one in every state. We don't have Armenians well organized in every state. In California, we have several. In Massachusetts, we have several. But we are well represented around the country. We have hundreds of thousands of activists. And this is how, frankly, we're able to persuade our friends in Congress to provide aid to Armenia. I would point out that Nagorno-Karabakh is the only place in the world that the United States does not officially recognize, yet provides foreign aid. Mm-hmm. And it's not because successive administrations write that into the bill. It's because Armenian Americans, led by the Armenian National Committee of America, are able to advocate with our friends in Congress and persuade them that Nagorno-Karabakh is deserving of aid, is a developing country, is a strong democracy, and embraces Western values, and is worthy of economic and developmental support.
We see that a lot of states already recognize the Armenian genocide, and we can also see parallel some phenomena. Some states already started recognizing Nagorno-Karabakh.
Yes, yes.
Is this another agenda for ANCA?
Absolutely.
Is this very important?
Very important.
Can we see one day U.S. recognized?
We would certainly hope. We have 43 states which have recognized genocide, and we probably have half a dozen states that have recognized the independence of Karabakh. Those that come to mind are Massachusetts, Rhode Island,
California?
Very recently, just a few weeks ago, California did. Amongst the most notable, there are others, and we continue to work in state legislators. Our local ANCs and our regional ANCs actively work on these issues. On the day it passed in California, we had people in Sacramento actively working on this. So yes, it's an important priority for the ANC, not just in the United States, but throughout the world. Just today, I'll give you breaking news. I have to give full credit to my ANC colleagues in Brussels. The European Parliament adopted a resolution criticizing Azeri aggression towards Nagorno-Karabakh. And that literally occurred today, and that effort was led by the Armenian National Committee of Europe.
And the other question we didn't discuss this, actually John Bass already has been confirmed by the United States Senate, and by the vote of 98-0.
Right.
Pretty convincing. What would you say about this confirmation? Do you have any objection?
Ambassadorial nominations are very rarely rejected by the Senate. In the last 50 or 60 years, only a handful have been, and frankly, 2 of them have been caused by our efforts.
Yes.
Ambassador Hoagland, Ambassador Designate Hoagland, who was nominated to be ambassador to Armenia, and Ambassador Matt Bryza, who was nominated to be ambassador to Azerbaijan. Both of those were defeated as a result of our work. The fact that the Senate would support a nominee to Turkey is not unusual. It's frankly the course. On balance, the Senate defers.
They need to have ambassador in Turkey,
yes,
because it's very important.
The Senate defers to the nominations by the President and from the State Department. I don't have any particular comment on Ambassador Bass. I do have a perspective that a United States ambassador to Turkey has an obligation to be pressing the Turkish government to do a number of things. One is to immediately lift the blockade on Armenia, as I previously discussed. Secondly is to come to grips with the truth.
They've been told already, so like, you know that for sure that the U.S. government always tells.
Well, the U.S. government has requested
Yeah.
that the blockade be lifted, but not as forcefully as I believe they should. They haven't made it as high a priority as we believe they should. Secondly, U.S. ambassadors should be urging Turkey to come to grips with its past and to acknowledge a genocide. And when President Obama was first elected and he traveled to Turkey, he said that his views had not changed, and he called upon Turkey to come to grips with what occurred. There is no compromise here that needs to be made by Armenia. This is for Turkey to step up and acknowledge what occurred, and the United States can play a very important role here, and the U.S. ambassador to Turkey has an important role in conveying that policy.
But this one is very important, diplomatic term, because we know that, 100th anniversary is coming.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely,
they have to be more forceful.
There's every reason 100 years out for Turkey to acknowledge the truth.
And the other question is, we see that how about the U.S.-Turkish relations? We see that Turks will not allow U.S. to use their Incirlik air base.
Right. U.S.-Turkish relations are in decline. They've been significantly impacted by a number of the very authoritarian policies that former Prime Minister, now President Erdogan, has embarked upon. Back in 2003, Turkey denied the United States permission to use the Incirlik air base to land troops as the operations against Iraq were commencing. And just now, when we have one of the most violent radical Islamic groups threatening Christians, threatening the civilization in the Middle East.
Opinion on that Islamic group.
I'll come back to that in a moment. Turkey has once again denied permission to the United States to use Incirlik. So Turkey has not been a very good ally, and it in the recent years has become increasingly autocratic and is no longer embracing Western values, and I think the United States needs to take stock of that. Turning to ISIS, I think it very ironic that here we are 99 years later, and we have a radical Islamic group threatening literally the survival of Christians in the Middle East. The stories of knives being held to the throats of Christians, forcing them to either convert on the spot or die, is no surprise to those who embrace radical Islam and who take such extremist views. And obviously 99 years ago in Turkey, they decided that they didn't need Christians, didn't want Christians, and embarked upon a campaign to exterminate Christians. That was obviously a terrible, terrible decision. Unfortunately for Armenians, we probably constituted in excess of 90% of the Christians who were there, and obviously many, many, many were killed in their efforts to leave. So this is a repeat of the past, and it's tragic, and our communities in the Middle East, whether it be Syria or Lebanon or other parts of the Middle East, are obviously very threatened, and we have an obligation to support them.
And do we have now more receptive ear in Washington after this Islamist advances in Middle East?
Well, I think there's a greater understanding of the plight of Christians. Just last week, there was a conference organized by a new group called In Defense of Christians, on which this issue was highlighted, and all of the world leaders of the Christian churches represented in the Middle East were present. Katolikos Adam was there, and he and others spoke forcefully about the plight of Christians in the Middle East. And what's interesting is when they had a brief meeting with President Obama, amongst themselves, they selected Katolikos Adam to be their spokesperson. So that's a credit to him, to how articulate he is, and to the message he conveyed to the audience, to the administration and State Department.
So he met with them.
He did. He met with Susan Rice, who's the chair of the National Security Council, and a brief meeting with President Obama, along with the other world leaders, church leaders.
And he conveyed all these messages.
He did. He did.
So thank you very much, Ken.
My pleasure.
If you have anything to add, you just...
I think the coming anniversary is obviously, as we all understand, a grave and momentous time for this country, Armenia. And it's a time that Armenia should pivot towards the future, should open itself up to greater democracy, greater openness of government, a greater engagement with the diaspora, and use this as an opportunity to grow the country to be a more viable and stronger partner in the League of Nations.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much, Ken.
Thanks.